Well, today is going to be a very, very sad video because I'm going to show you the big losers in my garden this summer. Some of them are specific plants, but a lot of them are just a specific plant category, like this one. This is a very dead boxwood. And the category is plants that were newly planted this season. This was actually a transplant. I took it from one part of the garden to another part of the garden. And even though I gave this pretty much TLC, I remembered to keep it watered, I mulched it with gravel, nevertheless, it just could not adapt to these temperatures. Remember, it's been in the hundreds for I don't know how many days. Stuart, how many days this summer? Has it been over 100? One day it got up to 112, and I noticed that for a lot of my plants, the tipping point is about 105. What the tipping point was for this very dead boxwood, I don't know, but it's definitely going to come out because it depresses me every time I walk by it. Okay, so I'm going to take this out and then we'll walk on to the next one. No, well, you can show me if you want, but I've got to do a little bit more digging on it. Yeah, you can do, actually, that would be pretty good, even if you speed it up. Come back and talk again. Now, even though I thought I had been watering this pretty well.
Start after I stop talking.
Okay. Well, even though I thought I had been watering this pretty well, clearly I had not been watering it enough because this soil is very, very dry here. And you may ask, what will I plant in its place? Well, right now, I think I may not plant anything because this is a difficult area for a plant to get established. I may not put anything here, and if I do, it might be in a container. So that is my loser number one for this season. I feel much better having it out of there. Now let's move on to the next one. Well, I wouldn't necessarily call this a cuba japonica a loser, but it definitely was very, very heat stressed this summer. Yeah, and it really did not like these brutal temperatures. Now, this one is very established. It's been here for years. One thing I sometimes notice during these brutally hot summers is that some of the very old specimens in my garden sometimes succumb. They're not newly planted, but they're also very established, almost to the point of old age. And I've been concerned that this cuba fell into that category. I'm also very concerned about this giant Japanese yew below it. But first, this gold dust plant. So you can see that it definitely has some browning. This is all heat related. This plant has been here for years. It hasn't been a problem. I'm not going to do any real major pruning on this, but definitely, again, just to make me feel better, I'm going to cut away some of the dead wood. Now, I also know that it's not going to die, or at least I don't think it is. I make no promises because, Stuart, if you can show right here, there is some new growth coming out. You can see right there. Yeah, that there's some new growth projecting out. So I'm going to cut this one off. Can you see that?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so I'm going to cut this one off. Again, no major pruning, but just enough that things look a little bit more attractive and less unsightly. Same thing with this branch right here. There is a new happier leaf and branch that's coming out at that point, and I'm going to cut this back. The other thing is, it very well could be that the reason that these are burnt is because they're on the outside where they're getting more light, a lot more intense sun, and that tells me it's not just the heat, it's not just the drought, it's also the intensity of the sun, because this is a shade plant that really likes a little bit more protection than it's getting. So while the interior might be protected and in more shade, these branches that project out into a sunnier area, speaking of being stressed because you're dry, it's very hot and my mouth is pretty dry, Stuart. So this, I'm just going to cut some of these things off to make it look a little bit better. I don't want to do anything too drastic, but now maybe when the new growth comes out, it will be in the interior in an area that's a little bit more protected and in a little bit more shade. Winner or loser, I don't really know, but I think at least it's going to make it unlike that boxwood. Well, I would never say that a viburnum is a loser in the garden because they are such stalwart, wonderful plants. But this all that glitters viburnum that I have pruned up into a small tree, this has been here for a number of years, and this is the first time since I've planted it, and it was probably, I'm going to say it may have been in 2015 that I planted it. This is the first time it has ever done this, where it's gotten really, really crispy on the tips of the canopy, on the tips of the foliage. Now, do I think this is going to make it? Absolutely. You can see here that there is some new growth coming out of the tip of this branch. But has it taken a hit in these century mark temperatures? Absolutely it has. Nevertheless, it's certainly not something I would consider a loser, even though, like Japanese maples and some other things that really, really got heat stressed this year, this one I think is going to recover nicely. But let's come over here. In contrast, Stuart, you're going to be so proud. So that was an all that glitters viburnum. I want you to look at this old-fashioned Chinese snowball viburnum. Look at how happy it looks. Not a single brown leaf, and that's probably because of the nature and the characteristics of the foliage. This has gray, more Mediterranean-like foliage. It is tough. It's not glossy. It's matte, and I think all of those characteristics of the foliage itself is what makes it such a trooper in the garden. It's just absolutely wonderful. I had no idea when I planted it that I would love it so much, and I had no idea when I planted it that it would become Stuart's very favorite thing in the garden. But it looks beautiful right now, whether you keep it small or you allow it to grow into a small tree like mine. I definitely think that this is a keeper for sure. Well, I wouldn't call emerald green arborvitaes a loser, but they are definitely ones that don't like a whole lot of heat. This one falls into that category of something that I transplanted this year, and it is definitely showing some signs of stress, even though I have been very religious about watering it. I don't think it's going to die, but I do know that I'm going to really have to cut back quite a bit of dead fronds from it. I need to make sure that I continue to water it really well. My takeaway from this is not so much that it's a loser, but in the future, whenever I plant these as a tall evergreen vertical element, I'm definitely going to make sure that they have more shade, more protection, and aren't exposed to the harshest sun of the day from the south and from the west. Those over here that are now muffled a little bit by the tarp, but they'll bounce right back, have been here for years. And they're starting to recover a little bit, and the fronds are not browning, but it's because I put up that shade tarp. Had I not done that, they would start browning pretty much too. So definitely, as you're observing things, make sure that you look to see which things may not be a loser, but definitely in the future when you plant them, you might consider the environment and the aspect in which you install them. Well, a definite loser in the garden is any kind of hydrangea that blooms on old wood. Why? Because the buds then can get nipped by a very, very late frost or by a very, very early frost, and then they produce no flowers. Much better to plant a variety that blooms on new wood and doesn't experience that same issue. You can see here, this is a Southern Living hydrangea. I believe this one is Dear Dolores. It bloomed on new wood, but you can see this whole expanse in here, beautiful foliage, but no blooms because it bloomed on old wood and those precious buds got frozen out. Well, back in 2011, we had another record-breaking hot summer. I think we had 40 days over 100 degrees. I almost lost the entirety of the boxwood and the potager. It was absolutely awful. Not that dissimilar to this year. Well, one thing I learned then, and I have put into practice ever since then, is that I no longer plant hostas in the ground. Now, some of you may gasp at that because you think hostas are so easy and they're just so amenable to gardening. But for me, where I garden in my heavy clay soil, where conditions swiftly change from full sun to shade and from shade back to full sun, I have just noticed that they're not long-lived if I plant them in the ground. And over time, they just keep reducing in size. So as a category, I would say hostas in the ground, for me, maybe not for you, are a loser. However, I still love their large-leaved boldness and how beautiful they are with finely textured plants. So I do still grow them. I just now grow them in containers. I've got some here, and I've also got some in the window box. So that's just some of the losers in my garden this year. I really would like to know what losers you had in your garden if it was very, very hot, what things you probably just won't plant anymore, or if you do, you will really modify their location and the environment in which you grow them. So there, my question of the day at the very end, I'm sorry, but that is, what experiences with very sad plants did you have this summer? Well, if you've held on this long, here is my outfit du jour. My earrings came from a bead store in Norman, Oklahoma, not hoops, no, home of OU. There was a fun little bead store in Norman. My top came from Amazon, I believe. I actually liked it so much I ordered another one. I've got this one in navy and I've got another one in kind of just a buff color. These are my shorts of the week. These are the ones that I just cut off. I got these probably at Goodwill, and just after having them for years, I cut them off. And my boots are from Target. So that's a really fancy outfit of the day. But nevertheless, it does the trick.